I am your host, Nicole Will, and we're so happy you're here as we navigate the world with your aging loved one. We are here to come alongside older adults, family members, and the senior living community as we explore the world of aging and elder care with helpful resources, informative interviews, and approachable conversation. We get to do this together, so join us on our journey, and this is the Will Gather podcast. How do we support caregivers with all of those caring responsibilities? It's important that we solve real problems for family caregivers. There can be so much coming at us. We are organizing care. We are trying to find help to get things done. We are managing all of the tasks that we have and then trying to communicate with everyone in our life where we are at and how our loved one is doing. My guest today is Michele Houck. She is the VP of Marketing for CircleOf, which is an app for family caregivers to provide support and information. It's a place to stay connected, organize care, receive help and encouragement, manage all of those caregiving tasks in one place, and then collaborate with group messaging and also connect with video calls. They also provide a wide variety of information from experts to help along your caregiving journey. Michele has been a family caregiver since she was 16 years old. She cared for her mother and sister, both with breast cancer. We hear from her how this really brought her personal experience along with her professional drive together. Our caregiver brain, the emotional charge, the anxiety that we can carry. This conversation unearthed a lot of emotion, and it's a great reminder why we need to seek support when we need it most. When we are in the throes of caregiving, we can experience decision fatigue. Having others step in and pull us up and provide help when we need it most is what CircleOf is all about. It's important to have those productivity tools in place to manage the care. It gives us space and frees us up to be able to focus on what's truly important to us, which is our loved ones. Here is my interview with Michele Houck. Michele.
Hello.
Hello. We're here. We've met. We've hung out. We've had incredible conversation together. Now we get to do this together, and I'm just beyond jazzed about it. So
I'm so excited too. I know. Thank you for having me here too. I'm really excited. And wow, what a great trip this has been.
oh my gosh, I know. So we are live at the Care Colloquium in Roanoke, Virginia. We get to podcast and sit across the table from each other and all meet each other. What do you think of it so far? How's it going for you?
It is one of the most inspiring group of people that I have had the pleasure of hanging out with, because we are all working to make the world a better place for caregivers, for people who need assistance, for the people who surround them and their friendships, their lives, their families. Because when you care for other people who are taking care of other people, it is the ultimate statement of paying it forward. We're all working together. It's not like other industries where people feel a little cutthroat and they have to go against one another and they're pitted against one another. We get to work together. And this Care Colloquium, I can't even say the word, but even though I can't say it, doesn't mean I don't feel it. Right. This has probably been one of the better gatherings, and I have been through CES, I've been through a ton of conferences in my past, in my experience. There's usually a bit of non-participation in those types of events, and there's a little bit of spectacle. This one is real people with real words and great solutions trying to knit together the best way to surround a care culture and a care economy that makes sense for both the employers and the individuals. And that is rare.
It is.
Truly rare.
I got goosebumps as you were talking. It's so true. I have not ever experienced, and I've been to a lot of conferences as well, where there is this people are excited to see each other. Everyone wants to meet each other. We want to talk. We want to collaborate. I was at dinner last night, and one gentleman started our conversation, which is, what is your need and how can I help you? Yeah. And being specific and intentional. And I just walked away from that dinner and just felt so filled up and encouraged and like, okay, we can do this together and move our initiative forward because we've got that support. It was just really, really neat to see.
Well, yeah, and when you can join hands and join purpose and have different business models that can support that along the way, because we are all coming from different backgrounds and we're bringing with us into this new care economy or care tech or age tech or just the larger conversation of support and bringing up a group of people that haven't been really acknowledged, even after the pandemic. Surprisingly, it brought it front and center on everybody's Zoom calendar, right? Like all of a sudden you see people with children jumping on them, their mom and dad are walking through the back, they're trying to figure it out. And just the visual of that, I think really helps support what all of us have been doing, like on the sidelines, just kind of knitting together little things.
Yeah.
And then we start to see this long silver thread that is actually tying us all together. And it is amazing because it is the same thing. It is corporate affairs. It is HR. It is family. It is sisters. It is brothers. It is neighbors. It is churches. It is government. We're humans. My God.
Yeah.
We take care of one another.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be a shock.
Right. Exactly. It's so cool to be here.
Yay!
I know. This is the beginning of so many good things.
It really is.
Good things.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim Whiter. I know. And Robin Weeks.
Yes.
And Bonnie Chavez.
Yes,
and
yes, yes.
I know I'm forgetting some names.
We need some serious shout outs. We'll just have a shout out podcast.
We do.
We'll make a haiku.
Yeah. I know. We need a Care Colloquium recap podcast, I think
I think that's what's going to happen.
What's going to happen.
Oh my God, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Yeah. Will you remind me?
I will. I promise. I promise.
Thank you. Thank you. You have really a remarkable personal story, and you've been in a caregiver role that started when you were 16. You've endured incredible hardship. You've experienced immense joy within that. There's been a lot that you've walked through. Your personal experience has also melded with your professional life, and I know we're going to get into that, but I want you to tell us about you and what that impact had on you and how it's really shaped your lens for why you're so passionate and showing up for people in the ways that you are right now.
I think a lot of people will relate to this, especially as a child caregiver or a teen caregiver. I mean, at 16, my mom got diagnosed with breast cancer, and shockingly, it wasn't a surprise in my family because her mother had a double mastectomy when she was 42. My mom was 42. And both of my mother's aunts, so my grandma's sisters, had also had breast cancer. So strangely, it wasn't a surprise. There was an expectation with it, but we still were caught flat-footed. My dad was a fighter pilot in Vietnam, and he was, still being a pilot at the time. He was still working at MacDill Air Force Base. And my sister Karen and my eldest sister Cindy were already pretty much out of the house. So it was the Michelle show, right? Taking care of mama. So that was the first time I became a caregiver, and helping her through that surgery, that radiation, and seeing it really up close. Kind of terrifying, but nobody said I was a caregiver. Nobody said you're missing class because of this. Nobody, you just didn't talk about it,
You just do it.
You just stand up, right?
Yeah.
And then she had several other bouts of breast cancer. So she ended up getting it 4 times. So when I was 25, I did Family Medical Leave Act. I was living in San Francisco at the time, and my parents, ironically enough, were in Saudi Arabia, and they had flown home for a surgery. And she had a really dramatic surgery. It's called, if I get this right, it's called a tram flap double mastectomy. They basically take off the entire front of your body, plus a hysterectomy. And so it's like a 10-hour surgery.
That's intense.
And I took a month off, 30 days Family Medical Leave Act, and came and took care of her to get her where she could stand up enough. And then my sister Karen came down, and we kind of, tag teamed it for a bit. And then she went back to Saudi Arabia, and they kept working there. Fast forward another few years, and she got cancer again, but survived it. And then in 2008, my sister Karen, who was the healthy one, she got diagnosed. She found a lump in her breast, and it was cancer. And strangely, like the next day, we went up and we climbed Mount Hood. And it's a technical climb at the top.
It really
It's,
is.
and this is in Oregon. For people who don't know, Mount Hood is a technical climb. And this is what kind of started the symbolic climb of a mountain for my sister Karen. And when I started climbing mountains, because I was like, okay, I need a place to see the world in a different way. Yeah. So Karen called me her lioness. And she made me sit at her bed, and I coached on everything from the type of surgery she would have, and who could be in the room, who couldn't be in the room, and managed all of her fans, for lack of a better way of saying it. And she also has had a daughter, and that is my niece Faith. And so Faith was 8 at the time, little millennial baby. And Karen was extraordinarily healthy. She was vegetarian. She never drank. She never smoked. She didn't have a stressful job. She did yoga. She worked for nutraceutical companies. Like, she did everything right. So if anybody's listening, please, if you have a family history of cancer, whatever cancer it is, please be proactive. Be proactive. And the reason I'm going to make that plea is this is, again, my caregiver journey. I've gone from being a teenage caregiver to being somebody's lioness. And I loved being my sister's lioness. She's we're 18 months apart. I don't know if they call those Irish twins.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. But, and hers was really aggressive, regrettably. She had a double mastectomy. It was first in her right breast, then it was in her left breast. That was 2 years later. Then it came back in her right breast. That was 3 years later. Through the whole thing, I was her lioness, and I was also helping to take care of my niece. I was getting a lot more involved with my niece. I was grateful that they all lived in Oregon, right? So my mom and dad had moved to Oregon. My sister had moved to Oregon. We're all in Oregon. This is super duper. Yeah. It's a great, ideal situation.
All there, yeah.
She was declared cancer-free, ironically, in 2016, in May of 2016, and she went to Spain because she spoke fluent Spanish. That's where she was when she was 18. She was in Madrid learning to speak Spanish. She came back from that trip and she wasn't feeling right. And they had declared her cancer-free, like she had had all the scans. And her back was hurting her really badly. And that is a sign. I can't say the word. It's like metastasized.
Yeah.
That's a hard word for me.
I know. I can't say
anyway, metastatic.
Yeah.
And so her cancer had leapt for the first time. And it leapt aggressively. And she didn't catch it until it crushed her spine. So after she'd been declared cancer-free, she never walked again. And so that was 2016. My niece is now 16. The day after I had just quit my job to start a new agency, my sister collapsed. I adopted my niece. I knew my sister would never walk again. And we were going to make some major adjustments in our lives. And we all kind of sprung into action around Karen. My mom, my dad, and me. And we were all also protecting my niece. This is where it's hard for me to talk about it.
Yeah. There's so much loss and pain. And you were holding everybody together because you were the voice when she couldn't have that voice.
Yeah. Like everybody says, it's brutal. I think Glennon Doyle says that, or Glennon Doyle. I can never say her name right either.
I love her though.
But her book actually gave me the words to try and communicate, because I was shocked. At the time that you need to speak the most and be the most clear and concise and articulate in order to protect the people that you love is the time that you lose your words. It's the time that you lose your voice. And you're terrified to say what you need to say. And my sister really struggled with the radiation therapy on this last one. And so in 2016, from October, November, December, Karen was in and out of radiation. We were really trying. Her spine had been crushed by the cancer, and they put in 2 titanium rods and 15 screws to try and put her back together again. It was just brutal. It's like medieval when you see that kind of thing. And some of the best surgeons, the Knights Cancer Research Institute in Oregon, which is, amazing. They were actually one of my clients through Intel. I knew these people, and they were doing their best for her. But the day she woke up after the surgery, they said she had 3 months to live. And I told them to get the hell out of the room.
Yeah.
I was like, you do not walk in this room and say that. And that's the other thing about the caregiver, like like this thing comes up in you and it's super emotional and it's primal and you want to protect everybody, but it's visceral. So this other personality view shows up and gosh, yeah, she was the lioness.
She was.
She was fierce. I didn't recognize her at first.
Your sister had foresight.
Yeah, she did.
Claiming that name for you.
I know. And if anybody hasn't seen me, I've got a big old fluffy mane of red hair. So
It's gorgeous.
anyway, so I think that's where it comes from in our family.
It's gorgeous, yeah.
So Karen decided, because the radiation therapy and everything was like really hard on her, she decided January 2nd of 2017 that she was going to stop trying. She was like, I'm going to die. And I need you to go home, Michele, Aunt Michele, and tell my daughter that I'm going to die. And that was my first act as a mom, was to tell my niece that her mom was going to die. And I don't think there's any training for that.
No.
I know.
There's not. There's not.
But there's a reason I'm very passionate about what I do right now, and, you know, advocacy and supporting women who go through this. Because at the same time, I was still trying to hold a job down because none of us had planned for Karen getting sick. You plan for your parents, but this suddenness is all hands on deck all at once.
Yeah.
And if it's somebody who is 50 or under, who is otherwise healthy, very strong, there's no expectation to be that person who becomes that caregiver. It's almost like a car accident. It's so sudden. I don't know if planning and preparation would have helped in this because the shock was so tremendous. But I do preach planning and preparation if you can do it. But I mean, it's hard to understand that. So Karen went into hospice, and I'll just fast forward through the next year of 2017. Karen died the day before her 51st birthday. So she's forever 50.
Forever 50.
While she was in hospice, her daughter celebrated, and I'm going to do that in air quotes, her 17th birthday, and she won state at volleyball. She was a state champion. So there was a lot hanging in this balance, this delicate balance of a young woman's life, who was now going to be in my supervision, like in my charge, right? Like now I have this tremendous person that I need to spring to action for. And I had a career that I was still trying to manage. There's a lot of details. I mean, everybody needs to know, and the trickiness of caregiving is in the details. But if somebody chooses to die and they don't fit a certain profile, you can't choose death with dignity in Oregon. You need 6 months. You need a psychological evaluation. So there's not death with dignity on that opportunity. So Karen died the day before her 51st birthday. We had her service, celebration of life, which I have a very difficult time saying, in June. And then my mother died on July 3rd after I was scattering Karen's ashes in Hawaii. So I came back from Hawaii with my niece, and my mom died, which was shocking. It was lung cancer, which was crazy because she had survived breast cancer so many times. We're all just like, this was just such a shock.
Yeah.
And my dad was devastated because they had the story of romance. My parents had such a romantic life. It was gorgeous. They were so in love. And that love was terrifying for me right at that point because I was like, I've read books. I've seen movies. I've seen The Notebook. Oh, my God, my dad's going to die. And he can't. And so I had that talk right away with him. I was like, Daddy, no. I know what your heart is feeling, and I need you. I'm just going to end it right there. I need you.
Yeah.
Don't leave. Faith needs you. Don't leave. And that was difficult because 3 months later, his dog died.
Oh, no.
I know. It's like I'm a bad country western song.
Okay.
I don't know. Like that's why I'm like, I just want to speed through that part.
We're just going to get through. Yeah.
And then my niece was struggling, as any child should. I was struggling, but she was really struggling. And that's the only job I've ever been given that I've never had a hard time trying to figure out. Just love that girl with everything I got, everything that my sister poured into her. So the easiest letter I ever wrote was that letter I wrote that night in August of 2017. I gave up my career, gave up everything.
Ultimate sacrifice, yeah.
To be with her and to be the best me that I could be for her. Because I'm not a mom. I'm an aunt. I wasn't trained for momness. So yeah, that was a real adjustment.
Did you step in and go, okay, I'm going to maintain aunt role, or did you feel like now I'm mom role?
I had to be mom.
Yeah.
And that was a tremendous shock for both of us because I'm much stricter than my sister was. I had very different philosophical beliefs than my sister. So she didn't believe in vaccinations, like polio. Like, like the big ones, right? Like I'm not talking about what we just went through, but like, the ones that will protect her for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
Measles, mumps, rubella. So I went through explaining that to my niece, and I went through taking up and becoming her real mom, caregiver, guardian, and giving her, I'm like, I'm going to meld the two, but I am not your friend. I am now your mom. And I'm going to know where you're going, what you're doing. And again, so like you're in that hyper nurture, we were both very hyper aware is the best way to put it. And it was not friction free, but good counseling for both of us.
Yeah.
I mean, after several attempts, you just have to find the right person, because she needed her words. I needed my words. We need to figure out this new relationship. Because it was always with love. Like, I was like, I love you more than I can even say. And I know you're so mad. You're so mad. And you have every right to be mad. Please, try.
Yeah.
And so the best thing I did, I'm going to tell you, this was my little kernel of wisdom that happened. I was like, look, this whole thing of like your expectation of who I am and my expectation of who you are or who you want to be doesn't matter. I want us to treat this like we're strangers. I want us to give us the grace that you give a stranger. That discovery period of figuring out who you are and not expecting me to be something I'm not. And I will not expect you to be something you're not. But I want to see you, and I want to know you and accept you. Will you do that with me? And she just looked at me and she's like, I'll try. I was like, that's all we can do.
That's all you can do.
And she tried, and she's amazing. Good story is Faith.
Incredible. It is.
My niece. She is like the best story in the world.
And a little side note, when we were visiting last night, you guys went on like a month-long trip through Europe and had just an incredible time together, and probably did more learning about each other, right?
It was one of the promises my sister, so my family travels, as I said, like my parents were in Saudi Arabia, that's where my dad was working, and my parents have traveled all over the world. They're a great example. And like I said, whirlwind love story, amazing human beings. My dad is this like fierce fighter pilot, ginger man, and my mom is this gorgeous, like smart technology. She was also a pilot. But they were just like so much. They were so big, their personality, their love. And that was the promise that my sister and my mother made me make, was to teach Faith how to travel as a young woman and to be bold enough to travel internationally and go places where you are uncomfortable but not in danger.
Yeah.
And open your mind and open your heart, because the thing that we know is that all people around the world really want what's best for their children, and they want their children to have a better life. And if we can all unite on that,
Yeah.
Faith has done it. Like, she understood. Like, in Morocco, there's very few mosques that non-believers are permitted into, grand mosques. And if you ever go to Casablanca, I took her in there because my parents had lived in Saudi Arabia, and to understand the Arab culture and to understand, the Muslim religion, to understand that is important.
Truly.
If you ever get to go there, it is one of the most, it's on the sea. The waves wash up on it. It's gorgeous. I mean, and at the same time, we went to some of the best churches around the world. And I just wanted to crack her head open and liberate her to have confidence to go forward as a young woman in this world. And that was what my promise was to my sister, and I kept it. And I'll keep keeping it. She's my girl.
Incredible gift. Incredible gift you gave her.
Yeah.
Wow.
She's bold and smart.
Yeah.
And kind.
I want to meet her someday. She sounds really, really
She's
really
the fashizzle.
amazing. So good. There's so much that goes into when we caregive and when we love deeply, and the highs and the lows and the emotions and all of that. And we want to hang on to that little semblance of, okay, what is that support? Where can I find that information? And the work that you are doing with CircleOf, I want you to share what that is And then we're going to talk about how some of those things that we experience, you and I talked about that caregiver brain, what happens when we're in it, the emotional charge, the anxiety, the different personas, right? When you said, okay, you step in and you take charge, or do we, the person that has the ability to plan ahead, or you're stepping in crisis, how that can support us along the way.
Yeah.
So please, I know that it's like so personal, but caregiving is personal. And I think that that's what we're realizing when we're meeting with all these incredible founders and thought leaders, is that everyone has this connection because of what we've been through. That makes
It's love.
it so much.
We are
more,
united
yeah.
by love, and it's super groovy because not a lot of people say that, right? I mean, and it's in this culture, you guys, if you're listening, care economy, care culture, you can say love. Yeah. Love is a good word.
It is.
It's a good 4-letter word. Let's play with that. And so is care. Care is a good 4-letter word.
4-letter words. We like some other ones.
And what
too,
about hope?
Yeah,
I know where you're going.
Exactly.
So yes, I did leave my career. I was a vice president, and I had to drop everything. And I've never not worked since I was 16. It's super disorienting. So caregiving, number one, is disorienting. Becoming a mother is disorienting. Losing your career is disorienting. The pandemic was disorienting. Let's all talk
Grief
about
is disorienting.
Yeah, it's dizzying, right?
Yeah.
It's marvelous in the way that your brain does have to reconfigure. But in the case that I was talking about, and I'm going to touch on caregiver brain, and then I'll go into how that feeds and informs a lot of what I'm doing now is, empathy for that caregiver brain. Yeah. Because you are on a crash course, and I had to learn everything I could about new technologies and ideas around how to support somebody who has metastatic breast cancer. What are the options? What are all? So you take on this medical language, right? And it's like coming up in an educational degree super fast, and you don't have Cancer for Dummies, but you also then have to understand the payer system, which is the insurance, and how that will be impacted. You need to understand the provider system. The provider system is sometimes knitted together with the payer system. The provider system is the hospitals, the radiologists, all of the ists that exist in the caregiver world, because you have to get them to appointments. You have to be there to witness what happens. You have to take notes. You have to understand what those impacts will be. So if she's sick today, will she be better tomorrow? Can I feed her today, or should I feed her tomorrow? So those are the impacts of that education. Then you also need to understand the house, the residence. Where is this person going to be? Are they going to be in a facility where they are protected and monitored 24/7, or are they going to be in my house? And do I have to be there 24/7? And if I can't be there 24/7, how are they going to be there? And going back to the payer, what is not paid for? Acupuncture was not paid for, and my sister loved acupuncture, and it took away some of her tumor pain. Okay, cool. I'm going to be paying for that acupuncturist. Karen's not paying for it. I'm paying for it. I've quit my job. How do we do this? Cool. That's another thing you got to noodle with. Then you have to understand the friends, her old support group, her new support group, and how do you communicate with them? What do they need to know? What do they want to know? And how can they help you? And then there's the family. And it's not just your immediate family. And we were pretty tight-knit because we were military. So the four of us, this was my pack, right? We moved every 2 years. We were very tight-knit, and we had a great shorthand conversation in body language. But that's only 4 people, and 2 of them were over 79. So it was kind of the Michelle show. But then there's extended family. Again, like when I start talking about this, I'm painting a picture of everything that a caregiver has to get up to speed with, but that's also why they can't think clearly, because they're really learning a new language. And it's a lot of different languages, and it's a lot of different management, and it's a lot of different organization. And I'm just going to put this, I was a very organized professional person. I had all of the tools. I had the Excels. I had all of the social handles. I had everything. I had all of the messaging systems. I had all of the phones and everything you need. But it was not enough. And it was messy. And things got lost. Oh, and like, dude, I didn't even talk about the finances and the legal. I mean, because banks have their own rules. If somebody is ill and you are representing them, and the paperwork you have to bring into the bank, every time you talk to one of these legal accounting or so it's legal, financial, accounting, and then wishes. These are all very different things. But again, what is the circle that caregiver is having to manage? And you want me to still be a vice president? I worked for a company that had 3 days of bereavement. There was no caregiver policy. And I'm just going to flash back everybody real quick. So I used to walk into boardrooms and I'd put my hands on my hip, all sassy in my 40s, and I'd go, where are the women? Can somebody tell me where the women are? Why is this room filled with men? Now I know where the women go. The women go and they take care of people. I had no idea. And I don't know if people can understand what a loss that is of that voice and that representation in the room. And I really hope that organizations, and there's a lot of people here representing them and trying to figure out ways to make organizations and employers and governments and states understand the loss of that wildly talented person who has now had to be up to speed on a lot of things. Wow. Let's go find that person and get them to work, because you know what? They are pretty efficient. Mm-hmm. They do have caregiver brain. Yeah. They can't articulate all the time, and they're really tired. But what you do get from them is brilliance.
Brilliance. The talent.
And there are men who do this too. And what's interesting is when I talk, I feel almost more worried about the male caregivers and younger caregivers. So like the millennials and the Gen Zs, people under 40 who love technology, who are becoming caregivers. More of them are males. And part of this is the long tail of epidemics in the United States. Mm-hmm. And I'm just talking about the United States, mm-hmm. but meth or drug addiction mm-hmm. or those types of things, grandparents were raising their children's children. Mm-hmm. So they were raising their grandkids. Yep. Those kids are now taking care of their grandparents as they age. A lot of those are males. A lot of those are very talented young women who haven't started their careers or their families. Let's support those people, eh? Let's support them.
Let's do it.
Let's figure out a way to make it so they don't have to give up as much. I think there's enough brain power for that.
And there's people that are really coming together. We've seen it right
mm-hmm.
now. So I'm hopeful, and there's an urgency.
Yeah, I love the urgency.
There's the urgency because we see it. We see how it's impacting
and there's
people.
passion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because love is love is love is love. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, it's so good. Mm-hmm. And that mm-hmm. is how I got into this whole care economy. So I had also worked at WebMD Health Services. And when I disappeared. And so like I just wrote my letter of resignation and I quietly slipped out the door. What do they call that? The Irish exit, like the Irish goodbye?
Yeah, it is.
Like when you're like, I just like
say goodbye.
And like I just like slipped out the door and I didn't tell anybody I was leaving. And some friends reached out to me and they're like, Michele, dude, where have you gone? Mm-hmm. And I was like, do you really want to know? Like, are these, and you get scared as a caregiver. That much grief is embarrassing. And I don't have another word for it mm-hmm. because people don't want to be around you. Mm-hmm. No, like you're real, the friend group that you thought loved you for who you are is not ready for. And it's a shock for them too. So I was nervous. I was like, "Are you sure you want to hang out with me? This is what's happened in my life." And thank heavens they did. Good. So I went out to lunch with these people, these really smart, engaged people who I'd worked with at WebMD Health Services, and they went to work for me and they networked for me and they introduced me to a lovely woman named Candace Smith, who started Caregiving. And she just had an idea. She didn't have an app yet. And they were like, well, you know product, you know technology, you understand marketing, you understand the language of caregiving. You're like custom made for this, right. Michele. How do you feel? And I was like, I don't feel ready for prime time. But I don't want my brain to turn to complete mush. So I'm going to volunteer for her. I'm going to help her because I need my brain back. Mm-hmm. I want to get Michele back. I miss her. And so this was 2018 to 2019. And Candace was a hustler, man. She got out there and she won a position at the Global Insurance Accelerator. She got somebody who was really talented and smart to do the technology for us and create an app based on Kubler-Ross's Stages of Grief. We actually made a caregiving app about that. And that was really amazing. And it was going to be direct to end user, but we needed to figure out how to monetize it, right? Because that's always the problem, right? You can make an app, but you got to figure out, are you going to run ads? Like, what are you going to do? Got to make money. Are you going to charge people? And I was adamant. I'm like, you do not charge caregivers. This will bring us up to CircleOf.
Yes.
Like, you do not charge caregivers because you know what? They got enough.
They're already paying for so many things. And incurring it all. Yeah.
Well, and you're losing your income.
Yep.
You're losing your savings. You're paying more. On average, I think AARP mentioned something like the average caregiver per year out of pocket will spend between $8,000 and $13,000.
Yeah,
just out of pocket.
It's about $1,000 a month, or more.
Correct.
Yeah,
depending on what the situation is. So, I mean, I love the way you put it down into a monthly thing. Thank you. I think that was smart. Do not charge caregivers. Let that sit with everybody for a while. Do not charge caregivers. Okay. I'm like, I just want to emphasize it.
We got a exclamation point.
I know. But when you go forward and I'm slowly building myself back, I'm gaining my confidence back. Because that's the other thing about caregiver brain. Part of it results from having to make really horrible decisions for the people you love most in this world. And you have to forgive yourself for those, especially if you're following their wishes and they're counter to what you want. That is the heartbreak, is following their wishes, following their lifestyle. It's not about you. And that's the difference between caring for an adult and caring for a child. You can tell a child what to do.
Yeah.
You have to respect an ailing or frail or aging person's wishes. Because if you don't give them their dignity and you don't give them their autonomy. And that's the last thing that they have.
What they have.
Do not take that. That's not your job as a caregiver. But that's where the emotion comes from, right? Is these terrible decisions that you, as the power of attorney or the healthcare power of attorney, are in charge of. So you do them. But it erodes your confidence and it makes you have fear. They used to have this song on this radio station in Tampa, where I'm from. And they would sing this song. And I remember I was singing it during hospice, so many hospices. But it was like, it's awful options. Hey, baby, what do you say? You gotta make one. Make your option today. It's awful options. Baby, what do you say? It's awful options. Options. And I sang that over and over and over and over and over again. Thank you, Q105 in Tampa, Florida, from my childhood.
I'm living that at the moment.
That is the caregiver song.
Yeah.
Awful options.
Yeah.
Because you don't have enough time. But yeah, caregiver brain, real thing. Like people say pregnancy brain, real thing. But when I got working with Candace on Caregiving, she got bought. Lovely, wonderful story. Great thing. She's getting this app in caregivers' hands through a company, which is wonderful. But at the same time, somebody reached out to me. Karen Pers, who runs her own company, she found me and she was like, whatever this company right here is doing, that's what we need because we're going to change our business model. Get this. So CircleOf came out of the Cisco Systems Hyper Innovations Lab. So it's called a chill lab. And Michael Jordan, who is our CEO, was down there and he created. He was one of the entrepreneurs in residence. So it was a mashup of entrepreneurs and investors and technology leaders. And they were looking to solve problems in 2017. So while I was going on this hellacious ride of caregiving, whatever, Mr. Toad's wild ride of caregiving, I was down there and he was down coming up with solutions with all of these industry leaders. And they came up with a company called My Ways. And it was originally, get this, made for people who were trying to be supported, who had patients who had cancer and their caregivers. So right up my alley, right there.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, that shoe fits, Cinderella, let's put it on. So I got to hear about them. I was introduced to them by Karen, ironically Karen Pers, and my sister, the love of my life, who died, it was Karen. I know, shut the front door.
What? The
I know.
synchronicity is wild.
It's spooky. Yeah. Anyway, so caregiving's going off on its own way, and I need to figure out who I want to be now that I'm feeling a little sturdier on the coming out of my caregiver shell. And my dad was still alive at the time, Then my dad, he died right before the pandemic. It was just too much. I think he missed my mom so incredibly much. He did his best. He ended up dying from, strangely, at 83, exposure to Agent Orange that he was exposed to in Vietnam.
That many years. Wow.
Dude, he willed himself.
Wow.
He willed himself. He missed my mom.
Yep.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a lot about that. And I having a military death and illness is very different, especially if it's a decorated military veteran. And my father was a decorated military veteran. So, we could have another podcast on how to deal with the military, right?
Yes.
Because these are all very unique situations that I
Yes.
got to experience.
Yes. And Patriot Angels, who you and I got to spend time with, one of the gals that is a part of that organization, which does support families and veterans. So,
Well, and so also
is
the Elizabeth
incredible.
Dole Foundation, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are resources out there,
Yeah.
and they are here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim.
yeah.
But I mean, and getting these people together. So when I got approached to go to CircleOf, what was great was they originally started out with Cisco and Walgreens and a lot of other large companies. And they were an employer benefit. So if you were employed by Cisco or these other companies, you were given CircleOf. And so they were trying to bring in a care culture and support caregivers. So, hey, thank you. Thank you, Cisco. Thank you, Walgreens.
Just
Thank
what
you,
we need.
all of these companies who were on the cutting edge before the pandemic and not doing like care washing or something. There used to
Yeah,
be
like
greenwashing.
coming
And
in at the end,
they
yeah.
didn't want a checkbox. They wanted a culture. That's huge. Thank you, Cisco. Community Health Network. So this is a group out of Indiana, was one of the original financiers of creating this technology. They got on a lot of people who could do product. CircleOf is also an app. And as an app, it's designed, and this is going to sound so lame, but if we use productivity tools to get through our days as workers and as producers, and a caregiver is probably the most on, I don't know, like you're just on people I have ever met. And they have to be wildly efficient. And if you aren't, I'll talk about that in a second. But with CircleOf, right around the time of the pandemic, in 2021, we were in the thick of the pandemic, they were listening to caregivers. What are the things that develops this app is feedback from caregivers. And so there's this real good loop from real users. We have about like 70,000 users using the app, and they constantly say, I wish you could do this. Why don't we do this? How do we do this? Did you know that caregivers go through this? And they inform the developers, which is amazing.
How it should be.
Yeah.
If you're creating a product for a caregiver, they have to be involved in the development.
They do.
I'm so like proud of your company for doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was like before I got there, this is their culture. This is who they are. And they're like, we're dealing with a special, unique population, and we don't know what we don't know. So let's listen to them. Groovy. That is awesome. They decided one of the feedback loops that they were getting was, can I still use your app even if I've been put on furlough? Can I use your app if I had to walk away from my job because now I have my kids at home because we were in the lockdown, and my mom has moved in with me because I don't want her to be in a facility because the facilities are very dangerous places for my mom right now. And I can't work because I have to. Can I please still use the app because I need it now more than ever because I don't even have home health aides now. I only have my neighbors and the people from church or the people down the street. Can I please keep your app? And I can't pay you. CircleOf made the decision in fall of 2021 to become free to all users. And that is tremendous. And so when they asked me to come on board in May of 2022, this year, 2020, yep. Okay.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, what year?
That was
What
like the
day is
caregiver
it?
brain jumping out. Sorry. But I was thrilled. I was thrilled. I can't believe. I mean, these are the good stories. These deserve to be shouted from rooftops. Caregivers need support. And an app is not the sexiest conversational piece to say, but if I can do anything to make it so you can organize rides, meals, doctor's appointments, notes from that, all of those family groups that I was talking about, your friends, your neighbors, your family, organize all your volunteers and your helping hands, organize all those people. And this is the cool thing. Get them to support you in your personal life. Walk your dog while you're out taking care of your mom or your dad or your sister. Pick up your kids from school. Get them a sandwich. Take them to a movie so you can go do your caregiver duties. That is what this app does. Because the caregiver is not solely focusing on taking care of a person who needs help. They're also balancing their professional and their personal lives. And getting support on both ends of that makes us whole. And we all deserve to be as whole as possible through these awful options and these different personas that we have to channel to show up and not scream cry every day. One of the coolest features that I will say that I had Candace put in Caregiving was the Primal Scream app. And you could and it was called the Scream into the Void.
Oh my gosh, it couldn't be more perfect.
Because you just want to
Yeah.
scream sometimes. And what was funny is after we had built that, the New York Times built one. I couldn't believe it.
What?
Everybody who's out there, occasionally just scream into the void. It feels good.
One of my best friends, along those same lines, she went into one of those rooms where you can throw and break dishes
Isn't that crazy?
and yell and just get out.
What are those called? I love it's like a destruction room
It
or
is.
something,
I
right?
can't remember the exact name. I'll tell you later when I remember. But I was like, what a brilliant concept. Well, how often do we feel like I just want to throw that thing across the room and just get it all out? Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
I know. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And it's okay. There's also this Japanese technique. Speaking of when you go through therapy, and Faith and I were doing this, they told us to break plates and then mend them with gold-colored glue. And there's a Japanese term for it. I can't remember what it is.
There is, and there's something, I've read something about that. And
But it's rebuilding
beautiful.
something
Yep.
broken.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Who knew? Who knew that could be just breaking dishes and putting them back together? If you're not sleeping at midnight, that's a pretty therapeutic thing to do.
And how wouldn't you say the caregiver and what we go through and grief and loss, we do have to mend what's broken in our hearts, in our lives, in our relationships.
Yeah.
How symbolic, how therapeutic to be able to do that.
It was spectacular. You and I are going to figure this out, and then we're
Yeah,
going to go
we're
break
gonna-
some plates.
We are.
Zach is here. I know he wants to break plates too.
He'd be right on that. He'd be right on that. Oh my goodness.
But yeah, I will say, we're launching our new website this week. This is, just trying to tie in the loose ends of what is CircleOf becoming, because we know it's hard to ask for help too. So it's easy to say there's a real good distinction between compassion and sympathy. Sympathy is great, but I think it gets more press than compassion. Compassion is showing up. Compassion is volunteering. But how do I get compassion to action is where the app comes into play. And so people can go into the app and say, I'm available every Thursday from 1 to 6 for whatever you need me for. And then there's an AI engine in the back that matches. So if you have a gap as the primary caregiver and you have people in the app who have said, these are the times I'm available, and I'm available for driving, or I'm available for dog walking, or I'm available for grocery shopping, or I'll drive your mom to the doctor's office if you can't get out of a meeting. Cool. But it happens automatically.
Which alleviates the mind. Right? When you're talking about all that we think of in the caregiver brain, we can't even sometimes articulate or think about what do I even need? Or now I got to orchestrate that, right? That's a whole
I have
other
to ask somebody
element.
to help me.
Yes.
And I'm embarrassed.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid of
Yeah.
rejection.
Yeah.
And if they say no and they're my only person, I'm going to have to hear no. And do you know how many times I heard no today? I've been on the phone with the health insurance people. Do you know how many times they've told me no? Do you know how many times the accountant told me that 15 minutes cost you $100 just to hear you cry on the phone? Don't make caregivers ask for help. There has to be a better way. I'm not saying ours is the best way, but it's a way.
It's a way.
To use it where people can go in and put in what hours and times and dates and chores or tasks they're available for. And then you can say, here's the gap in my calendar, and you hit a button. They get a notice. They show up. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you.
It's
Wow.
it's solving those problems. Again, that was caregiver initiated. They're like, I don't want to ask people for help. I choke every time I try and ask. Can you please make it so I don't have to ask them, even though I know they want to do it? We can't assume that everybody's like us.
I was on the panel yesterday, and that was a conversation that we had, or the question that was posed was what not to say to caregivers.
I loved that one.
So good. And what I had shared was that let's not say, oh, let me know how I can help. And this speaks exactly to what the problem that you guys are solving. People will say that, and I know they mean goodwill.
They do.
Right? And I know I've said it before.
Yeah.
But what it does is it goes, okay, now I have to think about what do I need to even tell you that I need help with? And then what if you just said that to be kind, and then the action, right? The action doesn't come. Or now I need to think about what I have to orchestrate to make the thing happen. And so it is like the biggest burden. And I think what feels so overwhelming is just the delegation. And so having something that automatically alleviates that makes it a little bit easier.
Well, and then what's interesting is because then you have option A, option B, option C. So if 5 people have told you they're available on a Thursday from 1 to 5, and then the first one says, oh no, I can't make it this week. They're not telling you, they're telling the app, I can't make it this week. It goes to option B. It goes to option C. Thank you. I don't have to make all those calls. I don't have to take those 3. And it's not rejection, but it is rejection. When you're a caregiver, you're just hyper-stimulated. So yes, what we all assume could be logical and just practical is not. It's laden with emotion. It's screaming in the corner, and you don't know it until you touch it, and then it's scary, right? Because then something triggers in you. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I am not enough. There's not enough time in the day. Oh, I have to be a manager. I can't be a sister. I can't curl up next to you and just brush your hair. I have to manage your day because you can't. And I just want to talk about how we used to ride horses together, but you want to know who's coming to visit next. And I have to tell you everything and take care of your finances and your house and your ex-boyfriend and your ex-husband and blah, 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 blah. And I don't want to.
The details.
So let's figure out a way to make that easier.
Yeah.
And the people are here to do that.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is, again, we are just an app. And I will say that with all respect for how much work has taken to do this. But we aren't the only solution. The other solutions that are out there are the people who actually help you find a place for respite care. The other solutions that are out there are like care.com. They find somebody to come clean your house for you so you can go and clean your mother's house or mow your lawn or walk your dog, or Rover will dog sit for you and house sit for you. We don't have that, so we're going into an affiliate merchant relationship. So that will be in the app and that will be on the website. Again, trying to solve the problems, putting the problems in context through content. So we actually are writing articles like, what if this is the scenario? Because this is the other really interesting thing about caregivers that we have learned. And I know just because I am one. We show up online in very weird ways and at strange hours of the night.
We do.
And we're searching for answers. We're searching for somebody who's gone through the same thing. So my trial and error is shorter. And caregivers want to support other caregivers. We love each other because we know we're all unique, but we know the journey. We know the filled up backpack. I think Amy said that yesterday, the backpack of emotions that walks in the room with you as you swagger on in, all of that financial information, lawyers, 45 minutes of hold time to get a stranger, so you have to explain it to them again. It's like peeling off a scab. Every time you talk to somebody new and explain why they're doing something that is not best for your person that you love, who is vulnerable. They can't like their jobs either. I mean, we've all seen that. That's hard. It's a hard. Everybody has it hard, right? So, showing up with kindness, if you can, organization helps get you there because it frees your mind from the details. It's not everything. But being organized, I will tell you, will give you more time for those cuddle moments, for those laughing and dancing and just reading the paper together, as opposed to planning what doctor's appointments to go to next and who's going to drive you and how am I going to manage that when I have the kids, the dog, and my job at my house. So let's solve the organization piece. And that's what CircleOf helps with. we're going to get better. We have so much cool stuff on our roadmap. I'm so excited.
Yeah, we're going to keep talking.
I hope so.
You can keep sharing and telling us what's coming.
Yeah,
And
it's
as
going
it
to be
evolves.
super cool. And again, like the inspiration comes from the fingertips of caregivers. They give us reviews, they provide us feedback, they reach out to the developers and they say, why doesn't this work, or could this work better? Like, for example, right now, and I just want to be fully transparent, like people are coming to us saying, wow, it's easier for me to get onto Venmo than it is to get onto your caregiving app. Thank you for telling us that. We understand we have some security and privacy protocols up front because it is caregiving, but Venmo has a lot of security and privacy protocols on it because it's finances. Let's figure that out together. Let's do this. And so my developers right now are back home working on that because that's important. Because if it's too hard, caregivers are dealing with a lot of hard paperwork, language we don't understand, legal language. Who understands legalese? Nobody. Except for people who make $100 every 15 minutes.
Yes, the people that need to. Your collaboration, and that was one of my questions, and I love how I was like, okay, we're so in tune because you just like answered that, is that you are collaborating and you're wanting to pull in all of those aspects that make it a little bit easier because okay, we can provide this one aspect of that, but we know from having lived it that there's all these other pieces to it. So really bringing that together to bring change. And within that collaboration and all of the change that is happening, what are you learning now about this collective caregiver society that is growing and is having a voice? What are you seeing? How are you encouraged?
It's no longer invisible work. We no longer are, like again, when I was talking about when you look on people's Zoom meetings and the kids, the dogs, and the parents show up and the fire alarm is going off and this, and our lives became so transparent. I'm happy, and this is going to sound really odd. I think a mass trauma like COVID was a forcing function for people to be able to see what we'd been hiding, what we've been trying to be discreet about, what we'd been trying to save faiths with. And there's some freedom, and people overuse the word authenticity, but there's some freedom in being able to be honest. Not all employers, they're trying, right? Like we're all trying to figure this out together. What is great is that people are trying. And for the first time, I think that, I would love it to see the language change about it because like you and I were talking earlier, there is power in words. There's power in people, and there are really smart people out there who understand linguistics and how to frame a situation or an issue, or some would call a problem, and put it into a way that it makes measurable impact, that it's not something that divides people's hearts, but it unifies us. Like, so when somebody sees a baby, right, they're like, oh my God, baby, so much potential. That's so great. I love babies. Let's take care of them. Can we embrace the end of life, not that happily, but without so much fear and mystery and divisiveness? Can we encourage people to have the hard conversations? There's a gentleman that's back in Portland. He writes these amazing books. I saw him at a TED Talk this year, and I'm actually going to approach him to make one about talking about caregiving for grandma or for grandpa or somebody who's ailing or sick or a veteran, somebody who has another invisible disease. The interesting thing about COVID and what we are learning about long COVID is they're calling it an invisible disease because you'll look at me and I look fine, but everything hurts. I can't smell, I can't taste. This is just hypothetical. This is not what I'm going through, I have liver issues now, or now I have a histamine intolerance because that has surged. It's the same thing as the virus. We're learning. And when people are in an active state of learning and they are being creative with all of their creative goodness, right? Good things will happen. Bad things will happen too, but we are going to learn something. And since we are in this collective coming out of this trauma, things will change. And that is good.
Yeah.
And change isn't, caregivers experience change on almost a catastrophic level. But adapting to change is the key to resilience, in my opinion. And if we would like to be resilient with one another, we need to have a care culture. One of the things that I learned when I took Faith down to Morocco, and we were on camels, we're out in the middle of the desert. We started in Iceland, we ended up in Morocco. We chased the Viking Trail.
So cool.
That was my thing. And we're out there, and I hired a guide, and he was driving us around. And at a certain point, the conversation turned, and he was a young man. He was like 28. And he goes, "Can I ask you a question about America?" And I said, "Sure." And he goes, "Why don't you take care of your old people? Why don't you take care of your mom and dad?" And I was like, "Easy."
Oh my.
And I was like, I think that's a general question. But let me answer that. I go, in our culture, we value strength, independence, and doing it yourself. And there's this pride in that. I go, so we aren't necessarily celebrating age and support and compassion and kindness, because these are really powerful. Like, I'm strong, I am independent, I made myself, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. We really value that. That's a value system, right? How do we take that value and pluck that shame out of aging, pluck that shame out of taking care of somebody, pluck that fear out of losing a leg? How do we do that? Dear linguists, I'd like to hear your answer, because I think we're on to something.
I think so too. As you're sitting here, I'm getting so emotional, because having these conversations and people hearing your voice and your perspective, it's going to start to create those like fires inside of our soul that go, we have to do better. And we can, and we're going to, and there are people committed to that. And that's what's been so incredible about this week, about us meeting together. We've shared so many hugs already, and I know that will continue. And I'm so thankful for you and for your vulnerability and for you sharing your story. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me a safe space, because I was really scared.
I know, but we did it. You did it amazingly.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see you too.
Yeah, I see you. We did it. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.